The crystal stemware felt impossibly fragile beneath my fingertips as I positioned each glass exactly 2 inches from the edge of the dining table. 8 months of working in Leonello Beneventi's estate had taught me precisely how he expected things. Immaculate, efficient, and invisible. That last part was less about the job and more about survival. I smoothed down the black uniform dress with its crisp white collar and checked my reflection in the polished surface of the silver candelabra. My dark hair was secured in a tight bun at the nape of my neck. Not a strand out of place. Professional, unremarkable, exactly what I needed to be in a house like this. The estate sprawled across 3 acres in Chicago's Lincoln Park, but tonight's business would unfold entirely in this formal dining room with its hand-painted Italian frescoes and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city skyline. Everything here whispered power: the Carrara marble imported from Tuscany, the Renaissance paintings I didn't dare research, the silence that felt more threatening than any raised voice. Even the chandeliers probably cost more than I'd earn in 5 years. Miss Kane. Vincent appeared in the doorway. He was the head of security, a man in his 50s built like a fortress, always respectful, but with eyes that catalogued threats the way other people counted calories. "Mr. Beneventi's guests arrive in 20 minutes, he said, his voice low and measured. "I need you to understand, tonight is different. Dante Ricci will be at this table." My hands stilled on the wine decanter. I'd heard that name whispered between security staff, always with a particular edge. Dante Ricci. The South Side boss. Volatile. Ambitious. Dangerous even by the standards of men who frequented this house. "Extra caution tonight," Vincent continued, stepping closer. His usual calm had fractured at the edges. "Serve efficiently. Don't linger. Don't make eye contact. Mr. Ricci has a reputation for testing boundaries." He paused, and something in his expression sent ice down my spine. "Don't give him any reason to notice you exist." I nodded, my throat suddenly tight. "Understood." "I mean it, Bernardine." The use of my first name made my pulse quicken. Vincent never used first names. "Keep your head down. Don't react to anything you hear at that table. Do your job and disappear. Can you do that?" "Yes." He studied me for a long moment, then left without another word, his footsteps silent despite his size. That was something I'd learned here: dangerous men moved like ghosts. I returned to the table settings, but my hands trembled now. The routine that usually centered me felt hollow tonight. I'd spent 8 months perfecting the art of being forgotten, existing in the spaces between people's attention. I worked this job to pay for my grandmother's mounting medical bills, to finish my psychology degree online 1 stolen hour at a time, to build a future that didn't involve men like Leonello Beneventi and Dante Ricci. But as I stepped back to survey the perfect arrangement, candlelight flickering across bone china, crystal catching golden light, everything positioned with surgical precision, I couldn't shake the feeling that tonight, my carefully constructed invisibility was about to shatter. And in a world like this, being seen could be the most dangerous thing of all. The first hour passed in carefully choreographed silence. I moved between the kitchen and dining room like a shadow, refilling wine glasses and clearing plates with movements I'd practiced until they were muscle memory. Leonello sat at the head of the table in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my car, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. He was handsome in the way expensive things were, polished, controlled, dangerous to touch. Dante Ricci sat to his left, younger than I'd expected, maybe late 30s, with slicked back hair and a smile that never reached his eyes. He'd brought 2 men with him, both wearing poorly concealed shoulder holsters. Vincent stood by the door, a statue that breathed. The conversation moved between English and Italian, discussions of territory and percentages and names I didn't recognize. I understood more than they assumed. My grandmother had raised me speaking her native language, though I'd learned early to keep that particular skill to myself. "The North Side ports are non-negotiable," Leonello said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume. Dante leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "Everything's negotiable, Beneventi. That's why we're here, no?" I moved to refill Dante's glass, keeping my eyes down, my movements efficient. His hand shot out and caught my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough to stop me. My heart slammed against my ribs. Aspetta, he said. Wait. Then he looked up at me, his gaze sliding over my face, down my neck, lingering in ways that made my skin crawl. He turned to Leonello with a lazy grin. Dove hai trovato questa? A proprio sexy. Magari dovrei assumere personale più decorativo. Where did you find this one? She's quite sexy. Maybe I should hire more decorative staff. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. I didn't move, didn't breathe. But my Italian grandmother's voice echoed in my head, translating every word, every inflection, every insult wrapped in false charm. Leonello's wine glass hit the table with a crack that made everyone flinch. He was on his feet before I could process what was happening, his chair scraping back, his hand slamming flat on the mahogany surface. Emilia, he snarled, his voice low and lethal, reverberating through the suddenly airless room. She's mine. The words hung there, impossible to take back, loaded with meaning that went far beyond a simple employer defending his staff. Vincent straightened by the door. Dante's men reached for their weapons. And Dante himself smiled, slow and satisfied, like he just confirmed exactly what he'd come here to discover. Leonello's eyes found mine for half a second, and in that fragment of time, I saw the realization hit him. What he'd said. What he'd revealed. What he'd just made me in front of everyone in this room. Not invisible anymore. Not a shadow. Not forgotten. His. I was scrubbing wine stains from the tablecloth at midnight when I heard his footsteps. Not Vincent's silent prowl or the heavy tread of security guards. These were different, measured, deliberate, belonging to a man who owned every inch of the space he walked through. I didn't turn around. My hands kept moving through the cold water, red bleeding into white porcelain, though my entire body had gone rigid with awareness. Did you understand what I said? Leonello's voice came from the doorway, rougher than it had been at dinner, stripped of its usual controlled elegance. At the table. Did you understand? My hands stilled in the water. I could lie. Should lie. Pretend I didn't speak Italian, that his declaration had been just noise to me, that I hadn't understood the weight of those 2 words that had detonated in that dining room. But I was tired of being invisible. Tired of pretending. I turned to face him, water dripping from my fingers onto the tile floor. He'd removed his jacket and tie, the top buttons of his white shirt undone, and somehow that made him more dangerous, not less. More human. More real. See, I said quietly. Yes. Ho capito ogni parola. I understood every word. Something flickered across his face, surprise, then something darker, more complex. He stepped into the kitchen, and suddenly the enormous room felt impossibly small. How long, he asked, switching to Italian, his accent flawless, northern, old money. How long have you spoken my language? My whole life. My grandmother raised me. I lifted my chin, meeting his eyes for the first time since that dinner 6 months ago when Vincent had hired me. She's from a village outside Naples. And you never said anything. It wasn't a question. Men like you don't hire maids who understand what they're saying. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. You hire ghosts. Furniture that walks. I needed this job, Mr. Beneventi. I needed you to forget I existed. I know. His jaw tightened. I know about your grandmother. The medical bills. The degree you're finishing online. He took another step closer, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark. I know everything, Bernardine. My name in his mouth felt like a confession. What you said tonight, I started. I shouldn't have. He cut me off, running a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. I wasn't thinking. Dante, Leonello stopped, something dangerous flashing in his eyes. The way he looked at you. I couldn't. You made me visible, I whispered. In front of everyone. You made me a target. I made you mine. The words were barely audible, but they hit like a gunshot. He moved closer still, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to hold his gaze. And the hell of it is, Bernadine, I meant it. I've meant it for months. My breath caught. You can't mean that. Can't I? His hand rose, hesitated an inch from my face, and I realized he was asking permission. Tell me you haven't felt this. Tell me I've been invisible to you. I should have lied. Should have stepped back, rebuilt my walls, remembered all the reasons this was impossible. But my grandmother had raised me to be honest, even when honesty was the most dangerous choice. You haven't, I admitted, the words breaking something open in my chest. You haven't been invisible to me for months. His hand finally touched my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone with a gentleness that contradicted everything I knew about him. Then we're both in trouble, he said softly. The call came 3 days later while I was dusting the library shelves. Dr. Patel's voice was professionally sympathetic, which somehow made it worse. The latest scans show progression, Miss Kane. We need to consider more aggressive options. A pause that felt like falling. There's an experimental treatment at Northwestern. It's shown promising results for cases like your grandmother's, but I have to be honest with you, insurance won't cover it. The cost is approximately $85,000. The leather-bound book in my hand slipped, hitting the floor with a thud that echoed through the two-story room. $85,000. I had $4,000 in savings. Maybe I could get loans, but with what collateral? My 10-year-old car? My associate's degree? How long do we have to decide? My voice sounded strange, distant. 2 weeks. After that, her condition will have deteriorated too far for the treatment to be effective. I thanked her, ended the call, set my phone down on the antique desk with hands that had forgotten how to be steady. Then I pressed my palms against my eyes and tried to remember how to breathe around the crushing weight in my chest. My grandmother had raised me after my parents died. She'd worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, had taught me Italian while braiding my hair, had been the only constant in a childhood of instability and loss. And now I was going to lose her because I couldn't afford to save her. The sob came out of nowhere, ripping through me before I could stop it. Then another. I sank into one of the leather chairs and let myself break apart in the silence of books and old money and a life I could never afford. Bernadine. I jerked upright, swiping at my face. Leonello stood in the doorway, still in his workout clothes, hair damp from the gym in the basement. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? I'm sorry, Mr. Beneventi. I'll get back to work. I stood too quickly, my vision swimming. Don't. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his hand catching my elbow when I swayed. What happened? Nothing. It's personal, I shouldn't have. Your grandmother. It wasn't a question. His eyes held mine, and something in them was too knowing, too certain. Tell me. The gentleness in his voice undid me. She's dying. There's a treatment, but it costs, my voice cracked. It doesn't matter. I can't afford it. I can't save her. His jaw tightened. How much? Mr. Beneventi. How much, Bernadine? $85,000. The number felt obscene in this room full of first editions and Persian rugs. I have 2 weeks. He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb making small circles on my elbow, an absent gesture that felt more intimate than it should. Finally, he said, "Let me help you." No. I stepped back, breaking contact. I can't, you can't. I can do whatever I want. His voice hardened with the authority I'd heard at that dinner table. And I want to help you. Why? The question came out broken. Why would you do that? He looked at me like the answer should be obvious, like he hadn't just claimed me as his in front of dangerous men 3 days ago, like this thing between us wasn't impossible and terrifying and real. Because she matters to you, he said quietly. Which means she matters to me. Before I could respond, he pulled out his phone and walked toward the window, already dialing. Vincent. I need you to pull a file. Everything on Bernadine Kane's grandmother, medical records, financial situation, family history. I want it in an hour. He glanced back at me, his expression unreadable in the afternoon light. And find out everything about that experimental treatment at Northwestern. The call came at 6 in the morning, 5 days after I'd broken down in the library. I was making coffee in the estate's kitchen when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Miss Kane? This is Jennifer Torres, patient advocate at Northwestern Memorial. Her voice was bright, almost excited. I'm calling about your grandmother, Rosa Kane. We have extraordinary news. My hand froze on the coffee pot. Is she okay? She's more than okay. An anonymous donor has come forward and paid the entire cost of her experimental treatment. All $85,000. We can begin the procedure as early as next week. The kitchen tilted. I grabbed the counter for support, my phone pressed so hard against my ear it hurt. What? That's not who. I'm afraid I can't disclose that information. The donor requested complete anonymity. But Miss Kane, your grandmother can get the treatment she needs. Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful. Impossible. Terrifying. I thanked her with words that felt disconnected from my body and ended the call with shaking hands. I found Leonello in his study 20 minutes later, sitting behind his mahogany desk reviewing contracts, a cup of espresso at his elbow. He looked up when I entered, and something flickered across his face before he smoothed it away. It was you, I said without preamble. He set down his pen with deliberate care. Good morning to you too, Bernadine. The hospital called. Someone paid for my grandmother's treatment. $85,000. Anonymous donor. I crossed my arms, trying to steady myself. It was you. Why would you think that? Because 5 days ago I told you about it, and now it's magically paid for? Leonello leaned back in his chair, his expression utterly calm. Do you have any proof? I don't need proof. I know it was you. You know nothing. He stood, walking around the desk with that predatory grace that made my pulse spike. Maybe you have a guardian angel. Maybe someone at the hospital took pity on your situation. Maybe it was a wealthy philanthropist who donates to medical causes. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back. Why does it matter who paid? Your grandmother gets to live. Because I don't want to owe you, I whispered. I don't want to be in your debt. Something dark and complex moved through his eyes. You think this is about debt? About you owing me something? Isn't it always, with men like you? He flinched like I'd slapped him. Men like me. He repeated it quietly, and I heard the edge of something that might have been hurt. Is that what you think of me? I wanted to take it back. Wanted to admit that he'd never treated me like anyone else in his world did, that he looked at me like I mattered, like I was real. But my pride was the only armor I had left. I don't know what to think, I said instead. Leonello studied me for a long moment, then stepped back, his walls sliding back into place. Believe what you want, Bernadine. But that money didn't come from me. I can't help it if someone else decided your grandmother deserved a chance. He returned to his desk, dismissing me. But as I turned to leave, I caught his reflection in the window, watching me with an expression that looked almost like longing. 2 weeks later, my grandmother began treatment. The doctors were optimistic. And every evening while I worked, Leonello would ask casual questions about her progress, his voice carefully neutral, his eyes betraying everything his words concealed. I never called him on the lie. And he never admitted the truth. But we both knew. The black sedan appeared 3 weeks after my grandmother started treatment. First in my rearview mirror on the drive to the hospital, then idling across from my apartment building, then parked 2 spaces down when I left the grocery store. Same car. Same tinted windows. Same feeling of being watched that made my skin crawl. Then the calls started. My phone would ring at odd hours, 2 in the morning, during my lunch break, while I was visiting my grandmother. I'd answer and hear nothing but breathing, sometimes the distant sound of traffic, then silence before the line went dead. The final straw came on a Tuesday. I'd left my purse in the estate's kitchen while cleaning the second floor. When I returned, everything was exactly where I'd left it, except my driver's license was facing the opposite direction. A small thing. Insignificant, maybe. Except I always put it behind my credit card, photo side down. Always. Someone had gone through my things. In Leonello's house. Past his security. I found Vincent in the security office, screens flickering with camera feeds from every angle of the estate. He took one look at my face and straightened. "Tell me," he said. I did. The car, the calls, the disturbed belongings. With each detail, his expression grew darker. When I finished, he pulled up footage on one of the monitors, fingers flying across the keyboard. "This car." He froze an image of the black sedan from the front gate camera. My stomach dropped. "Yes. That's the one." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Dante Ricci's organization. They've been running surveillance on you for 2 weeks." He turned to face me fully. "Miss Kane, you're being used as leverage. He's testing Leonello's attachment to you, looking for weaknesses." The room suddenly felt too small. "What does that mean?" "It means you're in danger." He reached for his radio. "And Leonello needs to know. Now." Leonello arrived in the security office within 3 minutes, still in his suit from a business meeting, his expression controlled until Vincent showed him the footage. Then something cold and lethal crossed his face. "How long?" His voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. 2 weeks that we've documented. Possibly longer." Leonello's hands curled into fists on the desk. "And you're just telling me this now?" "We were gathering evidence, trying to confirm." "Gathering evidence." He turned to me, and I saw the rage he was barely containing, saw the fear beneath it. "You're moving into the guest suite. Tonight." "Mr. Beneventi, I can't." "That wasn't a request." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Dante is using you to get to me. That car following you? Those calls? That was a message. He's telling me he can reach you whenever he wants." His hand came up to cup my face, the gesture unconscious, possessive. "I won't let him touch you. I have an apartment. A life outside this house." "You had a life." His thumb traced my cheekbone, and despite everything, my breath caught. "Now you have a target on your back because I claimed you in front of dangerous men. Because I couldn't control myself for one goddamn minute." His eyes held mine, intense and tortured. "Let me protect you. Please." The please broke me. Leonello Beneventi didn't beg. Didn't ask. But he was asking now, and I could see what it cost him. "Okay," I whispered. He exhaled like I'd just saved his life. "Vincent, move her things. I want her in the East Wing guest suite by tonight. Double the security detail. And find out everything about Dante's movements for the past month." His hand still cupped my face, his forehead nearly touching mine. "I won't let him hurt you," he breathed. "I swear it." And standing there in the security office with cameras watching and Vincent pretending not to notice, I realized we'd crossed another line we could never uncross. Living in the East Wing should have felt like a prison. Instead, it felt like coming home. The first morning, I found Leonello in the kitchen at 6, making espresso in a white t-shirt and dress pants, his hair still damp from the shower. He looked up when I entered, something vulnerable crossing his face before he could hide it. "Coffee," he offered. "Please." It became our ritual. 6 in the morning, before the security team changed shifts, before Vincent started his rounds, before the rest of the world demanded things from us. Just 2 cups of coffee and conversations that ranged from my psychology coursework to his childhood in Naples to whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Normal things. Impossible things for people like us. The late nights started by accident. I'd found him in his study at 2 in the morning, surrounded by contracts and ledgers, a glass of whiskey forgotten at his elbow. He'd looked exhausted. Haunted. Can't sleep. I'd asked from the doorway. Never could. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Keep me company?" So I did. Night after night, I'd curl up in that leather chair with a textbook while he worked, the silence between us comfortable in ways I'd never experienced with anyone else. Sometimes we'd talk. Sometimes we wouldn't. But the space we shared felt sacred somehow. Then there were the small touches. His hand at the small of my back when I reached for a wine glass on a high shelf. His fingers steadying me when I stumbled on the stairs in heels I wasn't used to wearing. The way he'd brush my hair back from my face when I was concentrating on my laptop, an absent gesture that made my heart stutter. We were falling. Both of us. And neither of us knew how to stop. The night everything changed, he came home at midnight with blood seeping through his white shirt. I was in the kitchen making tea when he walked in, his jaw tight with pain he was trying to hide. "It's nothing," he said before I could ask. "Sit down." I grabbed the first aid kit Vincent kept under the sink. "Now, Leonello." He sat. Let me unbutton his shirt with shaking hands, reveal the knife wound slicing across his ribs. Not deep, but ugly. The kind of wound that came from business meetings that had nothing to do with business. "This is going to hurt," I warned, cleaning the wound with antiseptic. His hand caught mine. "I'm used to pain." "That doesn't mean you have to suffer through it alone." Something in his eyes cracked open. "Bernadine. Hold still." I focused on the wound, on bandaging it properly, on anything except how close we were, how his skin felt under my fingers, how badly I wanted to kiss the pain away from his mouth. "I've never wanted to protect anyone the way I want to protect you." His voice was rough, raw. "It terrifies me. You terrify me." I finished taping the bandage and looked up at him. "Why?" "Because you make me want things I can't have. A normal life. A future that doesn't end in violence. You." His hand came up to cup my jaw, thumb tracing my lower lip. "Especially you. Leonello. Tell me to stop." His forehead touched mine, his breath warm against my lips. "Tell me this is a mistake." I should have remembered all the reasons this was impossible. But his eyes held such naked longing, such desperate hope, and I was tired of pretending I didn't feel the same. "I can't," I whispered. He kissed me then, gentle and devastating, one hand tangled in my hair, the other pulling me closer despite his injured ribs. I kissed him back like I was drowning and he was air, like we weren't standing in a kitchen at midnight with danger circling outside. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to mine again. "We can't take this back," he said softly. "I know. You're mine now. Truly mine." "I know that too." The garden was where I went to think. Where the roses bloomed despite the violence that funded them, where I could pretend for a moment that this life might actually work. Leonello had been in New York for 2 days. I missed him with an intensity that should have frightened me but instead felt right. Natural. Like missing a part of myself. "Miss Kane." The voice came from behind me, smooth and oily. I turned to find a man in an expensive suit standing near the fountain, a leather briefcase in one hand. Not one of Leonello's men. I'd memorized every face on the security team. "You're trespassing," I said calmly, though my heart had started racing. "Just delivering a message." He set the briefcase on the stone bench, clicked it open. Stacks of cash. Photographs. My stomach turned as I recognized myself in the images, walking with Leonello, his hand at my back. Sitting close in his study. Nothing inappropriate, but through the telephoto lens, they looked damning. "Intimate. $75,000, the man continued. "And safe passage out of Chicago. All you have to do is answer a few questions about Mr. Beneventi's business operations." My psychology training kicked in automatically. Stay calm. Observe. Document. I slipped my phone from my pocket, began recording with practiced casualness. "What kind of questions?" I asked, angling the phone to capture his face. "Offshore accounts. Meeting schedules. Names of his international contacts." He smiled like this was a job interview. "Simple things for someone in your position." My position as his maid. His mistress, according to these photos. I took a deliberate picture of him, the flash making him flinch. Those photos show nothing except a man helping someone downstairs. Tell Dante Ricci that he's misunderstood the situation entirely. That's a lot of money to turn down. It's blood money. I want no part of it. I photographed the cash, the open briefcase, his license plate visible through the garden gate. You should leave now. Security does rounds every 15 minutes. You're making a mistake. No. You made the mistake. Coming here. Thinking I could be bought. I met his eyes steadily. I choose Leonello freely. Not because I'm forced, not because I'm paid. Tell Dante that fear and money won't work because there's nothing to exploit. Now get out before I call Vincent. He grabbed the briefcase and left, his footsteps quick on the gravel path. I waited until the gate closed before my hands started shaking. When Leonello's car pulled through the gates 4 hours later, I was waiting. I handed him my phone without preamble. Everything's recorded, I said. I thought you should know. He watched the video, his face going dangerously still. When he looked up, his eyes were blazing. You refused. Of course I refused. You could have run. Taken the money. Disappeared. I could have. I stepped closer. But I chose you. I'll always choose you. The commission meeting happened in a windowless room downtown, the kind of place where empires were built and destroyed over handshakes and threats. I wasn't there, but Vincent told me later that Leonello had walked in with my phone, the video queued up, and the photographs spread across the mahogany table like a card game where he held all the aces. Dante Ricci attempted to bribe my employee for information about my operations, Leonello had said, his voice carrying the quiet menace that made grown men nervous. He had her followed, photographed without consent, and cornered on my property while I was out of the city. These are not the actions of a businessman. These are the actions of a man who has forgotten the rules we all agreed to follow. The video played. Dante's associate offering cash, demanding secrets, threatening. The commission watched in silence. This destabilizes everything we've built, Leonello continued. If one of us can target another's household, terrorize civilians under our protection, where does it end? Our wives? Our children? Dante's recklessness puts us all at risk. The vote was unanimous. Dante would pay restitution, $2 million, and withdraw from all Chicago operations. His territory would be redistributed. His reputation, shattered. Vincent said Dante had looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Leonello came home just after midnight. I was in the library, pretending to study but really just waiting. He found me there, loosening his tie as he crossed the room. It's done, he said quietly. Dante's finished in this city. Good. He sat beside me on the sofa, close enough that our shoulders touched. Your courage made me realize something today. When you faced that man in the garden, you weren't thinking about money or safety. You were thinking about what was right. About integrity. I was thinking about you, I corrected softly. Exactly. He turned to face me, his expression more open than I'd ever seen it. You chose me knowing what I am. What I do. And it made me ask myself, am I worth choosing? Does this life deserve you? Leonello. The answer is no. Not this life. Not the way it is now. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. But maybe a different life could be. A legitimate one. Real estate. Restaurants. Import businesses that don't require violence or lies. My heart stuttered. You're talking about leaving all of this. I'm talking about building something that won't get you killed. Something I can be proud of instead of just powerful from. His eyes searched mine. Something worthy of you. That will take years. It's dangerous to transition. I know. But I want to try. For you. For us. He lifted my hand to his lips. You showed me what real courage looks like. Now let me show you what real change looks like. I kissed him then, tasting hope and promise and the terrifying possibility of an actual future. Okay, I whispered against his mouth. Let's build something real. 14 months changed everything. Leonello's transition to legitimate business had been methodical, careful, and surprisingly successful. The restaurants thrived. The import company secured contracts with major retailers. The real estate holdings appreciated. He divested from everything illegal piece by piece, burned bridges he'd spent decades building, and emerged on the other side as something he'd never been before, clean. I'd graduated summa cum laude, my psychology degree finally complete. Nana's experimental treatment had worked beyond anyone's hopes. She was in remission, her laughter filling our Sunday dinners again. Now we stood on a terrace overlooking the Amalfi Coast, the Mediterranean stretching endlessly before us, and I understood why his grandparents had fallen in love here. The beauty was almost painful. My mother likes you, Leonello said, his arm around my waist. We'd spent 3 days in Naples, where his elderly mother had fed me until I couldn't move and told me stories about Leonello as a boy, sweet stories, gentle stories that revealed the man beneath the reputation. I like her too. She said you have kind eyes. That you'll keep me honest. He turned to face me, his expression nervous in a way I'd never seen. Bernardine, these 14 months have been the best of my life. Not because of the business success or the legitimacy. Because of you. Because every morning I wake up and you're there, and every night I go to sleep knowing you chose to stay. My heart started pounding. My grandparents stood on this terrace 60 years ago, he continued, reaching into his pocket. My grandfather proposed with this ring. He opened the small velvet box, revealing an antique gold band with a single perfect sapphire. I'm asking you the same question he asked her. Will you build something real with me? Not just a business or a life, but a partnership. A family. Everything. Tears blurred my vision. Yes. Always yes. He slipped the ring on my finger, kissed me with the setting sun painting everything gold, and I felt complete in a way I'd never imagined possible. The wedding happened 3 months later in Nana's garden, exactly where Leonello had first realized he loved me. Late September, when the roses bloomed their last defiant beauty before winter. Nana sat in the front row, healthy and radiant in lavender silk, crying happy tears. Vincent stood beside Leonello as best man, his sunglasses not quite hiding his own tears. My hand rested on the small swell of my belly, our daughter, the one we'd name after my mother. As I walked down the makeshift aisle between chairs filled with people who'd become family, Leonello's eyes never left mine. Not with possession or control, but with partnership. With love that meant freedom instead of captivity. You're mine, he'd said that first night. But standing there in Nana's garden, exchanging vows that meant forever, I understood the truth. We were each other's. Freely. Completely. Finally home.